Hi everybody, welcome to Big Valley Living. Today we're going to can kidney beans because we don't have any left that we had purchased at Costco, and we made a pact that we were going to be canning our own beans as we ran out of canned goods that we had previously purchased.
Yeah, these we got these from Azure Standard, so they're organic beans. These came straight out of what we got, so they still have to be rinsed and gone through and make sure there's nothing in there. So this is just what came right out of the box. So we're going to use what's called the quick soak method, and that's also in the book here.
This
The Bible.
This is the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning, and you can order this printed on Amazon, or you can go to the USDA website. We always go to check this before we can something, just to make sure that we are following all of the instructions from approved, tested methods.
So in that guide, it does show the quick soak method, which is you bring your beans up to a boil for 2 minutes and then shut them off and let them sit there in that hot water for an hour.
Covered.
Covered, yes. The next part, then you take and you drain and rinse them off. And the next part, I don't know that I could actually cook them this long, because previously when I did the pinto beans, I actually boiled them for 10 minutes. And
the second time
in the guide it shows to do it for 30 minutes. I did it for 10 minutes, and they make really good refried beans, but they don't necessarily stand up like I want them to. So this time what we'll do is we'll do the quick soak, where we bring it up to a boil, let it sit for an hour. But then the next time I'm going to bring it up to a boil and just let it be there for about a minute and shut it off, and then we go right into filling jars and water to fill out the rest of the jar, because these will continue to absorb water even after they're canned and everything. They'll continue to suck water. It's amazing how much water these things will take.
So we're going to be canning in quarts, and that requires approximately 5 pounds of dried beans before you start. So we are going to end up getting approximately 7 quarts out of this. And I think that that's enough of an overview. We're going to sort the beans and rinse them off and get them into a pan and get them started on the quick soak. Is that it?
There we go.
So we have rinsed and sorted the beans, and we were making sure that we didn't have any little pebbles in there. I've been making my own homemade beans, not necessarily canning them, but for like 30 plus years, and I have seen exactly 2 little pebbles in all that time. So it's not something that's common. But what I do like to make sure that I do is these are the types of bits that I have pulled out, okay? Because any like, here's like a wrinkly bean, it's not gonna plump up, okay? These are kind of just clinkers, okay? That's what we call them, as clinkers. And then if they're broken open like this, that's gonna add a lot of starch to your jar. And when you have starch in the jar, they're ugly. And I hate to say that, but when you can your own food, you do have control over how it looks. And we all like our food to look appealing even while it's sitting on the jar. Make sure that when you put your beans in the pan, you start with cold water. Don't start with warm water or hot water and think you're gonna, cheat the system, because they won't react the right way. They won't absorb the right amount of water, and you'll have an inferior bean, if you will. So what we're gonna, and then I need to make another point here. This is a really large pot. This is a 12 quart stock pot, okay? So for 5 pounds of beans, you're gonna need a really, really big pan, and we'll show you what they look like after the first soak, which is going to be bring them up to a boil And then we're going to turn the heat off and we're going to put a lid on it and let it sit for an hour. After that hour, you're going to see how much higher these beans come. Rule of thumb for us is that we fill the pot with water to the top of the beans and then put that much more water into the pan. So essentially you're going to have twice as much water as far as depth goes as you do beans. When you add water to your pan, if any of the beans float, I would also consider that a clinker, and my recommendation is to take the floaters out. So we're going to go ahead and start this on high. Oops. And we will come back after the first soak is finished.
You will be absolutely amazed at how high these get. They'll be like right up in here. How much they expand, it's just crazy.
One of the important parts of preparing to can your own food is to obviously make sure that the jars are clean and that you don't have any chips or anything like that. So I'm just going to show you, these were already cleaned, but I like to just give them one more nice, quick, soapy. This had been soaking a while ago in the soapy water. But in particular, what you want to watch for is to make sure that you have no chips on here. I've already looked at this, that's why I'm rubbing my hand on it. If you're going to use your dishwasher to clean your jars, that's perfectly fine. As long as the water gets nice and hot. But check for those cracks or any chips before you put it into your dishwasher, because then you're just wasting your time. You will not get a good seal and you risk getting germs into your food. So it's extremely important that these are intact and you see no cracks or any kind of blemishes on your jar. Another note here, we're going to be hot. This is called a hot pack, okay? So when the beans are ready to go into the jars need to be hot. So I've just washed them in hot soapy water to make sure there's no dust, and I've done my check of the rims and make sure that they're intact and everything's in good shape. Now we are also going to keep these jars have to be kept hot. So there are two ways you can do it. You could put them into just hot plain water in your sink, and I'm talking hot, hot, hot. Or you can heat them up in a canner to make sure that they're super hot. So the reason that we're doing that is that you don't want to have thermal shock. And that's basically putting something hot into something cold, or putting something cold into something hot. Like if you've ever taken a glass out of the dishwasher and it was warm to the touch, and you went and you put some ice in it or something and the glass cracked, that is thermal shock. Okay, now we're going to talk about the lids. We have some lids that we were able to get last year. They're called Kerr or Care. Okay. They're very hard to get right now, so good luck on that. You really don't want to use lids that have been laying in Grandma's drawer for a few years, because this seal here is going to melt while they're canning, and that's what's going to create the seal on your jar. You also do not want to use one of these lids 2 times, okay? It's not recommended, because after you've used it once, there's no guarantee that you'll get a good seal from this compound that is used. So what's going to happen is it's going to be on the jar, it's going to get heated up, and then and that's what's going to create your seal. So just a heads up on that. So we give these a quick wash, and then you may have also, maybe if your aunt or grandma, or if you've canned in years past, you used to have to keep these in, they recommended keeping them in a bowl of warm water, or even to get them simmering. The manufacturer states that you do not have to heat these in simmering water if you're going to be canning or processing for over 10 minutes. These are going to process for 90 minutes in a pressure canner, so they are definitely going to get hot enough, long enough. The next thing I'm going to do is clean my rings. I'll show you one. Just going to rinse them off. Again, on a ring, make sure you don't have rust or anything like that. That's just no good. You don't want that near your food, right? Okay, so these are actually somewhat new because we had a package of lids with bands. So you can see there's no rust. You don't see any, like when sometimes you break a seal and you hit it with your knife. You don't want any of that. So just check for any kind of imperfections. And once you know you're fine, you're fine. And I'm going to clean the rest of them, and we'll see you when we are at the next step.
To combat siphoning, we're going to be just putting the jars into hot water. So I'll probably bring these up to a boil. This is totally not necessary or anything. It's just I have found that it helps with siphoning, which is liquid that comes out of the jar during the canning process. But if everything's really hot, there's not much room for expansion, so it tends to stay in the jar a little better. And we have this over here by the sink, because if you can see this spigot here, which is oh so nice, we can empty out the water without picking this thing up, because this is about, I think it's 21 or 22 quarts, so it's huge. And when it's full of water, this thing's pretty heavy. So this is just our step. Just getting it so that these things are really hot when we put them into the canner and put everything else in it, because everything's going to be hot. So in our All-American canner, it says to have 2 to 3 inches of water in the canner to operate it, and we're going to be running this for 90 minutes. So I always try to get pretty close to the 3 inches. And what I did was I just marked it on a spoon so that I knew the minimum and the maximum. So if I fill that up, you can see it's just below the 3-inch mark, which is cool with me. And so I want to make sure I had plenty of water. So and it's pretty close to this line that's now, kind of in this canner because it's been used a little bit. So that's really the hard water line. So,
and then another point that we need to make before we start the canning process is that when we rinse the beans, about the time that we rinse the beans after the soak, and then put fresh water in there to bring them up to a boil again, that means we're going to be getting really close to the actual canning of the beans. So at that point, we're going to be putting the lid on this, not tightening it down, but we'll put the lid on this and bring that water up to a hot temperature. Just like everything else, everything's going to be very hot. And if we had hot jars with hot beans and hot water going into cold water, you know what's going to happen. We're going to have a failure and everything's going to crack open. It's going to be a lot of wasted time, food, and energy.
And one more point kind of to that. With the All-American canner, this thing's pretty thick. It's probably a 1/2 inch thick aluminum, or 3/8, and it takes it a little bit to warm up. So I put hot water in here, and I'm gonna put it on. I'm gonna put my stove on to medium just to keep it so it gets hot and it gets heated clear through here, so that once we do start to can, everything's pretty close to the temperature and going up, and it'll just come up faster to get to pressure. Okay, so this is all set up because we're still waiting for the beans to finish up and before we go to the second boil. So have a trivet so that the pan can sit here. And we just use this strainer because we'll be able to take whatever water is in there and get rid of it, because it'll have extra starch and all that kind of stuff in it. The jars will actually sit here. And this is vinegar that will be used to wipe around the rim, which that's what that paper towel's for. This is the funnel, and of course our way to grab a hold of them and put them into the canner.
We use the funnel, we keep the funnel on another jar so that it doesn't touch any other surface. That jar has also been cleaned. and that way any drips get caught on the inside. And again, we're not putting the funnel between filling jars, we're not putting the funnel on any surface that may have contamination on it.
Right, and it's a lot more necessary to do that when you're doing jams and jellies and stuff, because you can really get really messy. This will just make sure that as little gets on the rim as possible. And once we're done with that, we'll have this set up and we'll bring you back. Alrighty then. So here we go. It's been sitting for an hour.
Always lift the lid away from your face when you open up a hot pan.
Isn't that crazy?
Woo, boy, that soaked up all the water.
Okie dokie. So now we'll take and drain these and rinse them and put them back on.
Add more water.
Add more water. More water and more water. So we've rinsed them and put them back into the pot with new water, and we're bringing those back up to a boil. There may be, a few things that float around in there. You can get rid of those. And
see some of these wrinkly beans? They're floating again. We take this opportunity to take these out as well. So we had less than a handful, probably a couple dozen beans, not that many.
yeah, and they'll really be floating around in here, and they're very easy to spot because they present themselves there.
Here.
So yeah,
That's what it looks like.
So they're kind of
So that's all
shriveled
we had.
up. So we'll bring this back up to a boil, and then it will be time to start putting it into jars. So I got both of these specifically for doing beans, and anything that we're going to can, adding just water straight to it. These things will bring water up to a boil in a heartbeat. The last time I did beans, I had this guy here, and it took a little bit longer than I wanted to take and fill it up and then have it boil again. So we picked up this one here.
They're
So this
inexpensive. They're only $20 or something at Target, you guys.
So it just makes everything easier. The two together is just shy of a gallon. So if you think about it, that's 4 quarts of the 7 of just water. So they'll both have plenty of room to be able to do this.
And we put filtered water in them to make sure that the water that is sitting with our beans in the jars for up to a year at a time. This is probably going to last us for about 6 months, but that way it's got nice filtered water in there, and hopefully everything stays nice and clean.
Yeah, because we're going to eat, it's going to be in with what we're eating, and it's going to get absorbed. So I just put regular water when I'm boiling the beans, and then once I'm going to put it into the jar, I make sure that that's filtered and can sit for a while.
And the beans will continue to absorb water when they go into the pantry. When they're all done, and they've they're sitting there for months at a time, they'll still continue to absorb a little bit more water.
Correct.
And here is the moment of truth. This is what we've been waiting for all afternoon. Professional tip: don't wait until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon to start this process. We always do. There's always something to do in the morning. Okay, so JJ is bringing the jars from the hot water bath, and I'm going to start putting beans in the jar. And we're going to fill these to, we're going to fill these to about 2/3, you think, JJ? Would that be a good way to say it?
On the ball jars,
This is a cur, so is that too much?
that's pretty close. So on the ball jars,
So we're gonna leave
to
it?
about 2.5 cups, somewhere in there. So if we look at this, that's just about right.
That's a heavy side on the beans. So
little bit heavy, but that's fine. just because these will continue to, you know, absorb water, and we don't want them to, you know, be totally dry.
Also, it's worth noting that we do not add salt or spices because these could end up in a salad, and so we don't want to have them pre-spiced. They're more than likely they're going to be in chili, but you never know, and we like the flexibility, and there's no need for added salt in anything because you can always spice your food later. So that's why we're going to do it this way. Yep, probably a little more than we wanted there. I think we're going to have way more beans than we need. We kind of have a little side bet going on here. And JJ thinks that I'm going to be surprised at how few are left. So remember, everything's super, super hot here. So that's why we're being careful. We're going to come back in with that boiling water in a minute. I think I'm going to win the bet on how much is left. But there's only so much room in the canner, so that's how that's going to play out. And you'll have to tell me if I should add a little more on that one.
I think those look pretty good. A little more than that.
A little bit
not
more?
much.
Okay. Yeah, you got to move pretty quickly once you start in on this part of the canning process. Ooh, someone's gonna be having beans this week. Just fine. I'll probably make a pot of chili tomorrow.
Leo, no. No.
Next door neighbor dog's barking, so Leo's gonna want to try and go out and visit with him. I don't like that being that close to the edge. Dogs always want out when we're right in the middle of something like this. So, Leo, hold on, buddy. Hold on, buddy. I know. Okay, yeah, we have just about. I think
A
that
little more in that one.
I personally think that
Maybe we'll
that
do a set of
particular
quarts.
recipe. Yeah, we may end up heating this up tomorrow, making more, because there's a lot left, and that'd be fine because then we just have more beans ready. Okay, so I'm gonna go let Leo out. JJ's gonna fill water in there.
So this is boiling hot water, so this is how we're gonna go here.
And we want 1 inch of headspace.
1 inch of headspace on beans. So that's right to the bottom round ring on the jar.
I'm gonna move these beans out of the way so that everybody can see that. Since we're done with them.
And then
So what he's talking about is just right here at that bottom ring. And you can see that water boiling up through there.
now you can see why I got 2 of these. Oop.
And we like tea and stuff, so these get some use. Okay, so as soon as he's finished with that hot water, I'm going to come in with a kind of a spatula device. It's called a debubbler. This I got at Williams-Sonoma. I like it because it's a little bit flexible on the edge. This one's more rigid. It's a little bit flexible. You can use a skewer. That wouldn't really be very robust, but you could use chopsticks, work well. Don't use anything with metal, okay? So what we're doing here is we're going to move them around. You can see we're going along the sides and just kind of giving them a gentle push, and that's going to make sure that there's no air trapped in the middle of everything, and it helps them settle a little bit. There's not a lot of air in these, but this is a step that you certainly do not want to miss. You don't want to miss any of the steps we're doing here. They all have to do with food safety, and it's just part of the process. We do have so many cans left though that we're gonna end up probably canning some more tomorrow night,
Probably some pints.
which is, yeah, we'll do some pints. That's a good idea for small meals.
And then when you debubble, sometimes it'll
settle the water.
take enough to where you actually need to add a little bit back in there to get it back up to your 1 inch.
But you don't want to have too much because you don't want it to boil over. Remember, it's going to be in a pressure canner, which is over 200 and is it 250 degrees?
240 to 40.
So everywhere that he's putting water, I have to go back and debubble.
No, you don't.
Okay, well I'm gonna.
Thank you.
Because I want to make sure. Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. Looks good.
And look at that, pretty much exactly the amount of water we needed.
Okay, so now what we're gonna do is take the vinegar. We're gonna dip our cloth in it, and I am just going around the edge to make sure that there's no. What you'd want is to have no debris. We don't want any of the starch from the beans in there. And you'll see here in a second, I'm going to show you. There's a little bit, so what I'm going to do is just make sure it's clean every time. That way if I pulled some debris from the previous jar, it won't transfer over, see? So even when you think it's clean, there's always going to be a little something there, okay? And that little something, as tiny as it is, can be just enough to prevent you from getting a good seal and keeping your food safe until you're ready to use it. We haven't had anything in our pantry. Well, we just started pressure canning in September. But we haven't had anything for more than about 6 months. We can enough to get us through, but not to have so much. I'm not keen on the idea of having food sitting around for 18 months, which they say you can do. But no thank you. Okay. Did I get them all, babe?
Yeah, these will last for years.
Okay. See how clean that is? Okay. So we're going to put that there. And now this is a little magnet tool. And it will grab these clean lids so that I don't have to touch them. And this is a pretty handy gadget. My neighbor, Dawn, gave that to us as a gift because she knows we love canning. And that way you don't have to touch the lids. So here's my handy dandy so I don't have to touch those hot jars. Finger tight.
Fingertip tight, like always.
Fingertip tight. So you want it to be tight, but not crazy. Oh God, those are hot. Okay. Now, so we typically tag team when we can. And so this is how it goes just about every time. JJ canned beans one time without my help, and the beans were great and everything, don't get me wrong, but he said it's definitely, oh shoot, see. Now, if you do something like I just did, because I got in a hurry, make sure that you re-clean the top, okay? You don't want anything to prevent that good seal. I'm doing this a little backwards from my normal way, so. I'm putting a ball lid on a curved jar. It's kind of killing the inside a little bit, but that's okay. All right. Let's go. Okay. And this is something else I like to do whenever possible. God, there we go again. Ball lid on a curved jar. That's just the way that's going to line up. Make sure your lids are on nice and straight because remember that goop has to make a seal. Okay. Oh, man. We need to have 2 of those bad boys out when we're doing these big quarts, so I don't get too close with my grabber. Okay. Oh boy, guys, it smells like vinegar in here. Glad we like vinegar. Okay. Just make sure that's right. We got a cur lid on a cur jar. What do you know? Okay. Another fun thing to do when you're canning is to get that lid so that the name is facing, like it's all lined up with the jar, the name of the jar. Just a fun little game we like to play. I like to play. It's a personal challenge. Let's see this and make sure. Okay, we got another cur jar. What kind of lid do we have here? Hey, hey, hey! We got a winner. And you use this again to make sure that you're not touching. You don't want to touch the band or you don't want to touch the inside of the jar. And this grabber that I'm using, it's easier to manipulate the jar with that versus trying to use a big oven mitt. It gets really bulky, but those jars are so hot you really have to have protection on your hands. Okay, so now JJ's getting ready to put everything together.
Okay, so all of the jars are in the canner, and in our particular version you can do 7 quarts or you can do 9 pints. So since we did quarts, we have all 7 of them in there. And for the All-American, it comes where this arrow lines up with this divot pretty much. Not pretty much, that's how you line it up to get ready for it to get into service here. And then you see these little tabs here. You want those to be underneath there, and you want this to be as level as you can. You just got to kind of move it around a little bit. That dude's screaming hot, so you got to be careful. That looks pretty good. And then with the All-American, you go either side. You go opposite sides from each other, and then just kind of get them not real tight, just tight enough to kind of hold it in place. My big arm in there, sorry. So there, you know, then just kind of come through. You don't have to do it real tight, you don't have to do it crazy tight. And now that thing's ready to rock and roll, I'm going to turn it up to about not completely up to high, but up high enough this thing can get going. And what we're going to look for is a steady stream of steam coming out of this guy right here. And since this has 2 gauges, once we get to where we have the weighted gauge on, this dial will actually go up. But we'll actually be going right off the weighted gauge. And for our altitude, we use 10 pounds of pressure because we're under 1,000 feet. And we'll let this thing heat up and we'll be right back. So as you can see, there's steam that started to come out of there. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a steady stream of about up to about here, where it's kind of going poop, poop, poop to right there. But we want it steady, and then we'll time it for 10 minutes. So now you can see that's a steady stream right there. So we'll go ahead and set the timer for 10 minutes, and we'll be right back. So this thing's just about ready. Got about 30 seconds and then the timer will go off. As you can see, you know, sometimes it'll spew up a little bit of water like that. That's fine. I just keep a towel close by and just kind of you know, wipe it off, and because otherwise it might pull up a little bit. It gets on the range hood and stuff. I just wipe it off as it goes along. So we're getting to the point where we'll have the weighted gauge, and as you can see, 5, 10, or 15 pounds is how this guy works. And we'll be using the 10 pounds. So the 10 pounds goes onto the valve right there, onto that that release. And now we just wait for this to come up to pressure. I do, as it's streaming pretty good. Once it actually gets going, I do start to turn the temperature down just a little bit so that it keeps rocking and rolling in there, but it's not rocking and rolling so hard that, you know, it's like going crazy. Then I'll actually, once this guy gets to thumping around, because it'll go, and you don't want it doing that all the time. You want it to do it like 3 to 4 times a minute. So I'll be adjusting the temperature even more then, and probably go down just a little bit above medium to medium high, somewhere in there. I have an electric stove, so it'll be about 6.5 to 7, and it'll sit there and it'll settle in right there. And once this thing starts to go, I'll come back and show you. So it's just getting ready to start doing its jiggle dance. And we may, you know, need to turn it down a little bit. It's taking it, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes to get to this point. And then it'll start rocking and rolling, and then adjust a little bit, and we'll start the timer, and bam. You can notice over on the dial gauge, it's like 10.5 pounds or so. So this will start rocking here pretty soon, because it usually starts right at about 11 pounds. It'll start doing that. There we go. So what you want to do is you want it to rock like that, you know, 3 to 4 times a minute. So you don't want it constantly rocking like that. You want it to stop and then do this again like 3 or 4 times a minute. I'll get it up to where it gets to rocking and rolling, then I'll start backing it off. But this may be just right. See how it's not going all the time. It stops, then it'll build up a little bit of pressure and it'll rock it off. So we'll do that, and I'll get it, since it's up to pressure. I will start my 90-minute pressure canning session, and I'll bring it back when it's all done. Okay, so this timer just now went off. We're at the end of our time, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to take the temperature. I'm not going to just come from, you know, where it is all the way down. I'm going to leave it here for a couple minutes, which is at number 3 on an electric stove. I don't know, between medium and low, you know, in that range, and let it slowly, because this canner will hold heat for a little bit. And I don't want it to just get really cool really fast and want pressure to drop really fast. I just want it to kind of come off pressure. So I'll do this for like 5 minutes, then I'll shut it off. And then I'll let this go to where we have pretty much 0 on this dial gauge right here. Right now it's at about 11 pounds. So we'll let that come down to pretty much 0. And then once that's done, that'll probably take it about 15-20 minutes. And then once it does that, I'll take this weighted gauge off. I'm not going to touch it. It's hot, roasting hot. And I'll take this off and let it continue to really go to 0. And then at that point, I'll let it sit for a couple minutes, and I'll undo those and open this thing up. And at that point, I'll bring you back and we'll see what we got. Okay, so I took the weighted gauge off. This was at 0. We had to wait. It probably took like 30 minutes, but I wanted to get this down to as close to 0 as I could, and then I took the weighted gauge off. So that's where we are now. And I will tell you that this thing is roasting hot still, for sure. And let's see. Yep. Okay, so I have this special little hammer here. It's kind of coated, which is kind of nice because I don't want to scratch this stuff up. But this thing won't move. So
that's common for this.
All it took was that little bit right there. And all of a sudden, bam, it came off. I didn't have to really wrench on it. It just gets held up just that ever so little bit. You can't turn it, you can't do anything, but you just get this little guy under there and it'll pop right up. So I just left this here because I really want to not lose too much pressure all at once. So I'll open this up in a couple minutes.
He's propped up these little brackets right here. I'm gonna try and
yeah, these guys that went under here.
I'm gonna try and focus in. So these little brackets now are sitting on top of that, and that's what we're talking about, okay? And that just lets just enough cooler air in without creating like this gigantic problem of cold air meeting hot air, because we don't want tornadoes in California.
Okay, so I let this sit for about 5 minutes. So I totally forgot to put the vinegar water in here, and you'll see here in a second why that's a big deal. So these are our most awesome,
Oh, they look great.
most awesome kidney
You
beans.
see that the water is still boiling there, which is interesting to note. And what you can't really see, because you should never tip a jar.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see the top of that. Can you?
Yeah, you can.
So
And there's a
that's
tiny bit of siphoning on this jar, so a little bit.
just
of
a little
water
bit
came
there.
out. But if it seals, we are not going to worry about it.
That's right, and that one
And
just
it is
sealed.
10 o'clock. There you go. Okay. Now, if you haven't canned before, there are divots at the top of those seals that I will show you when he gets all of them out.
Do not tip your
they
jars.
Really look nice. There are divots at the top of the seals, and when they're fully pressurized, you'll hear a ping kind of sound. It's like a canner's dream. And now we're kind of waiting for that, and it's going to take a few minutes. You know, these were in the canner for 90 minutes. You can still see.
So really,
I'm actually zoning in just a little bit. You can see those beans kind of floating right there in that can.
kind of going up and down.
So they're still boiling after, what, 30 minutes, 40 minutes of
30 minutes.
the canning process being done.
Okay, so those are still hot. And if we look down into the canner here, it's almost
Ooh, that's
non-existent.
clear.
It's almost non-existent. But one jar, I don't know, that could have been where water was coming off of the top of that. And my bad for not putting the vinegar in there, because that would take care of a lot of these spotting issues and stuff. That's on me, but now we'll let these sit here for overnight. We'll deal with these tomorrow after work, so they'll be able to sit here.
Oh, did you hear that?
The ping! The ping! The ping!
We love the ping.
Actually, I think they're already all sealed.
It was that
Maybe
one.
that one? Oh, okay.
We have
I think they're all
one
sealed,
can that has not sealed yet. And
And again, so that everyone notice that there's about this much water in here on pretty much all of these. So I'm going to tell you right now, just from past experience, that that water's going to go into those beans that are in those jars.
And the water
And
will probably
it will
just
probably come
cover
down a little
the
bit.
finished beans.
Right. The water will probably come down to in this area, which is a great headspace for beans, because here's a quick tip. No matter what you're canning, let's say you get siphoning or whatever, but as long as you have half the liquid in there and that seal is tight, you're all good to go. Don't worry about that, because sometimes people can chicken and different kinds of stuff, but you want at least half of the liquid in that jar. Anything half and above, and it's okay. You get to where you don't really have anything in there and everything's dry. Yeah, it's pretty sketchy. But as long as that thing's sealed and you have over half of the liquid in there, you're good to go.
All right, no pain. We're done. Hey everybody, thanks for visiting Big Valley Living. We will start editing this bad boy. It's Sunday night, the 25th of April. So hopefully you'll see it in the next couple of days. And golly, come on, ping, please. Nope. Well, it did seal, it just didn't ping for us. It just did a gentle seal. Thanks again for joining us on this bean canning extravaganza. We had enough where we're probably going to be able to get 9 more pints out of the beans, and that's pretty much what we would have purchased at Costco in the course of a year. So next you'll probably see Big Valley Living starting to use these canned products for some easy weeknight meals. Thanks a lot for joining us, everybody.
See you later, everybody.
That's just your hand.
Oh.
Go ahead.
See you later, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Be kind.